I know it's October 17th, 2025. This is the next to last meeting on the Georgia Senate Study Committee on Recovery Residences. At the next meeting, we've already started receiving some recommendations from committee members. At the next meeting, we will have all those consolidated into some format, and I'll ask each committee member to vote on the recommendations that we're going to be making. But as we always do, we'll start this committee meeting off with a prayer. So if anyone feels comfortable, please bow your head. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning as your humble servant, Lord God. We ask that today you give us the wisdom, the compassion, and the open heart required to gather the information that we need in order to make the lives of Georgia families impacted by addiction better. As we move through the testimony and process, God, we ask that you give us the patience needed and the kindness required, Lord God, to move through today's agenda. We ask these things in the name of your Son and my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. If want to, let's see. Ian, if you want to come on up to mic 2 there in the middle. I think you remember the conversation we had before.
Yes, sir.
Good to have Senator Jackson. Thank you. I appreciate you. I don't need that. And thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. I'm not claiming it's a conspiracy, but I think the minister stood in the hallway until I completed the prayer and then she came in. But in our past committee hearing, you and I got into some interesting conversations about zoning. And as we move through this process and what I'm looking at the recommendations, I'm not looking at recommendations where Senator Robertson and Senator Jackson have to come up with a whole bunch of new laws and all this other stuff to try to correct what we realize is a problem. What I'm hoping we'll do is come up with a lot of recommendations on policy adjustments where we can come in and make changes. And I'll go ahead and let you know at the next meeting, I'm planning on inviting Georgia Municipal Association and the Association of County Governments in here, because I do think that the not in my backyard mentality has hurt a lot of opportunities in communities when it comes to addressing certain issues, whether it's addiction recovery centers or residences, or whether it's a place to house some of our younger citizens who are having some mental health issues or who are involved in foster care or something like that. And while I appreciate everybody wanting to maintain the integrity of their neighborhood and community, I think we can accomplish both. We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I was very impressed with your presentation when you came in and showed us some of the facilities, some of the residences that y'all have established in some very nice parts of town. And I want to be clear, I don't think it takes an affluent neighborhood to help somebody get their life back together. But I do think that people that want to establish these legitimate residence programs should not be hamstrung about where they can put them. And so, but with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the mic over to you for your presentation. And as I remind all of our witnesses, you're here to educate us. So there will be times that you'll be interrupted by myself or Senator Jackson for questions. It's not because we're trying to break your chain of thought, but I'm worried about she and I remembering what we want to ask when we get to the end. So it helps us learn a whole lot more if we can ask questions as we move along. So with that, the mic's hot.
Wonderful. Well, my name is Ian Neubauer. I'm an owner operator of Second Chance Recovery Residences here in Atlanta, Roswell, Sandy Springs area. while I love to hear myself speak and talk about these things, I have actually asked a nationally renowned, the expert on zoning and recovery community residences, we'll call them. So what
Yep.
you were describing, there's recovery residences, which is specific to substance use. Then there are community residences, which is the broader spectrum of mentally, mental illness, battered women, everything that falls under that umbrella that are protected under the Fair Housing Act. Mr. Lauber, on the screen he's written the book since 1973 on kind of regulating this at the municipal county level. And so I asked him if he would be so kind as to join us, and he very kindly agreed to do so. So, Daniel, if you want to introduce yourself, if you want to start walking through your slides, and what we've kind of envisioned for this is he has given this presentation again multiple times to many to many governments. But I can speak from the boots on the ground level. So to the extent that you guys have questions as to how something plays out, practically speaking, I'm here. I'll chime in, and we'll just kind of take it like that.
Thank you. Sir, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. I very much appreciate this opportunity to testify before the committee. I do have to give you one caveat. I think Senator Kirkpatrick could explain what this is, but I've got a spasm in my right trapezoidal muscle in my back. So I'm in somewhat intense pain, and I will shoulder on as best I can. This is why I'm not wearing a tie. I can't lift my arm far enough to put on a tie. And I know you're going to have lots of questions. I'm hoping that my presentation will answer nearly all of them. So I hope you'll be patient, because most of the questions you're going to have are going to be answered in the presentation. First, we need to remember that the power to zone resides with the state of Georgia. Municipalities have no power to zone, had no power to zone until the state of Georgia granted them that power, most likely through a zoning enabling act. And when municipalities act badly and misuse that power of zoning to frustrate the goals of the state of Georgia, which I believe include fighting back against this opioid and substance abuse epidemic, then the state needs to consider doing what 39 other states have done, and that is recapturing its power to govern zoning and establish statewide zoning that is fair and balanced, that preserves neighborhoods, but enables these very necessary recovery residences and other community residences for people with disabilities to locate in the single-family districts and other residential districts in which they belong. I want to make it really clear at the outset that any statewide zoning has to apply to all community residences for people with disabilities. It cannot apply just to recovery residences. A lot of the states, of the 39 states that have adopted some statewide zoning, have applied them just to group homes for people with mental illness, or group homes for people with developmental disabilities. Kentucky's done it just for recovery residences. Those are all illegal. It has to apply to all people with disabilities. And any zoning that's adopted needs to be principled. It's got to be based on careful analysis and facts and case law.
Sir, I'm going to interrupt you really quick, and I respect the fact that you're going to answer all the questions, but something you just said, who has determined that Kentucky's law is illegal?
I would suggest it is. I did some free work for a town there, and their zoning applies only to recovery residences.
And
Needs to apply
listen,
to
I
all.
greatly appreciate your opinion. Senator Jackson and I have to work for a thing where when we're up here, the only people that determine things are illegal wear black robes. So we have to be really careful if we can't give a court case or a judicial opinion of something being illegal. Or if you can do that as you move through here, that would be greatly helpful to both of us as we present our recommendations in the upcoming legislative session.
Okay, I would like to suggest then that if Kentucky's statewide law were challenged by someone seeking to establish a community residence for a population other than people with substance use disorder, the odds are very strong that it would be found to be discriminatory against the people with the other disability.
That's great. Thank you.
So can you put the next slide on, please? Whoever's controlling the slides there.
Yeah, he's got them.
Okay. And to the next slide. This is a fundamental principle that is backed up by tons of court cases. And this is where you've got to be very, very careful. There's a basic legal principle from the case law that zoning that treats a group of people with disabilities differently than the same size group of people without disabilities is illegal on its face. So zoning controls that prevent clustering and concentrations that undermine the ability of these community residents to achieve their core principles of normalization, community integration, and the use of non-disabled neighbors as role models are undermined if there is no way to prevent them from clustering together. For example, there's in Maryland, in Montgomery County, there's a developer of a big corporation developed a whole cul-de-sac of sober homes, which defeats the whole purpose of them. In the Florida study that was distributed to you, you can see a number of instances of severe clustering. And that undermines the ability of these homes to actually do their things, and they're being done largely by the uncertified operators that are not adhering to key basic principles. So if a zoning code doesn't define family or household, zoning can't regulate community residences for people with disabilities at all, because they constitute a family like anybody else. If a zoning code has a definition of family that allows any number of unrelated individuals to live together as a single housekeeping unit, you can't regulate the community residences through zoning either. But if a zoning code, and most of them do, places a cap on the number of unrelated people that constitutes a family, zoning can then regulate those community residences that exceed that cap. So it's very common for a city to have zoning that limits a family to 4 unrelated people. It's perfectly legal. The Supreme Court ruled that way back in the Belterre case of 1973. And those homes that fit within the definition, say just 4 people, those are families like any other. So they're treated as any other family. The city can't regulate them can't require a license. Well, the state still can, but the city can't, or county can't. If you can't apply a spacing distance to it, you just got to treat it the same as any other family. With recovery residences, you want more than 4 people for them to be successful. The sweet spot seems to be somewhere between 12 and 8. It varies. With people with mental illness, you want to have around 8 to 12 people. It's largely people with developmental disabilities that you want to have the real small homes. So that's when you have to make this reasonable accommodation to allow the community residences for more than the definition of family allows. Could you advance to the next slide, please? So what unfortunately has been going on in Georgia as well as around the rest of the country, a lot of cities have been imposing on community residences that fit in the definition of family zoning restrictions, like a spacing distance or not allowing them at all. Those are all illegal, and there's plenty of court cases that verify that. When cities do that, that's when they throw out the spacing. And I was involved as an expert witness for the Department of Justice in 2001 in a Chicago Heights case, where the existing group home had 5 people in it. The definition of family allowed 5 people, unrelated people, to be a family. And Thresholds wanted to establish another group home for a different disability within the city's 850-foot spacing distance, and the city turned them down. We won under summary judgment. And the judge ruled that the existing group home was a family because it fit in the definition of family. So there was no spacing to be applied. It was a family. And that's where a lot of cities and counties have gone wrong. Some actually exclude recovery residences from the zoning code's definition of family. Some treat recovery residences differently than other community residences for people with other disabilities, but they all, as I have suggested, need to be treated the same. And indeed, the Joint Department of Justice and HUD memo on this points that out as well. Next slide, please. So one of the problems is that cities don't make this reasonable accommodation to allow community residences that exceed the definition of family's cap on unrelateds to locate in many zoning districts. They need to be allowed as permitted uses, subject to being outside of a rationally based spacing distance. They're licensed or certified. That is so critical to require licensing or certification. And they don't have more than 12 residents, because we can feel very comfortable that as many as 12 people could emulate a family, which is a core, essential characteristic of community residences, where the staff are in the role of the parents and the residents are in the role of the siblings. And I know a lot of operators don't like that analogy. It's not meant to denigrate or suggest that the residents of a community residence are childlike. It's just the functional relationship that exists for them. So it's clearly unjustifiable. For example, Johns Creek has a mile spacing distance. Now I got to explain this. I'm the yo-yo who came up with the whole spacing distance idea back in 1974. I was working for the American Society of Planning Officials. We were doing a planning advisory service report, which is one of now 500 reports that are sort of the Bible of the city planning profession. And we had seen that as long as group homes were not clustered together on a block or concentrated in a neighborhood, they had no effect on property values, property turnover rates, or neighborhood safety. That conclusion has since been confirmed by more than 50 or 60 studies. And it's a dead solid conclusion. No one's funding these studies anymore because it's a lot like no one's funding studies, does smoking cause cancer? It's just so well determined. So Johns Creek's 1 mile distance, Roswell's 3,500 feet spacing distance, Atlanta's 2,000 feet spacing distance, are characteristic of those that have been thrown out in court. The Economowalk, Wisconsin decision threw out a 2,500 foot spacing distance. There's a Michigan decision that threw out 1,500 feet. The Beaumont, Texas settlement threw out the 2,500 foot spacing distance that was established by the state of Texas. So state legislation does not serve as a safety valve for a locality. And those states that have adopted zoning that I would characterize would not pass a legal test, saying you're doing what the state mandated doesn't get the city off the hook. It cost Beaumont, Texas, as you can see from the handout that was distributed to you about settlements and court decisions, it cost them well over $500,000. And they knew. I was in touch with them prior to once the lawsuit was filed, trying to convince them they needed to admit they made a mistake with their zoning, but there was a law firm there that with good connections to the city that really wanted to fight this, and they lost. Next slide, please. So then you've got some cities that are always requiring a case-by-case review for community residences and to locate in residential zoning districts. Many cities failed to provide a case-by-case review to make the reasonable accommodation to locate these uses within a spacing distance, because sometimes they should be allowed within the spacing distance. They failed to provide for those community residences for which a license or certification isn't available. So for example, there are community residences for people with eating disorders. I don't know of any state that has licensing for those yet. And they failed to provide to allow more than 12 occupants in a community residence. The big problem is those that limit you to 6 or 8 people. Absolutely unreasonable. But the courts have really clearly stated the rule that you've got to allow more people in the community residence if it's needed to ensure therapeutic and or financial viability. I would also add in the zoning that I've been writing around the country, they also still have to be able to show that they can emulate a family. Next slide, please. So there are solutions. Next slide, please. The underlying principle from the case law, and I have reviewed the case law in depth and found the patterns. The Fair Housing Act, Amendments Act of 1988, signed by President Ronald Reagan, a bipartisan act, requires that states and local zoning regulations must be for these community residences for people with disabilities, must be fact-based, and they've got to be intended to achieve a legitimate government interest. They actually have to accomplish that legitimate government interest. None of these legal myths. It really has to do it. And you've got to use the least drastic means that's needed to actually attain the legitimate government interest. Next slide. I'm going to show you how to do that using the least drastic means necessary. I've been evolving this concept since our Planning Advisory Service report in 1974, which I would call Zoning for Group Homes Beta version 0.5. We're now on Zoning for Group Homes version 25. It has advanced quite a bit as we have learned more. So this is how it would work. If you have a city with a cap of 4 unrelated individuals as the definition of family, it's a family. You treat it the same as any other family. No additional zoning requirements. But if you exceed that cap of 4, that's when you have to make that reasonable accommodation that President Reagan's Act requires, using the least drastic means that actually achieves the legitimate government interest. Next slide. The way to do it is we divide community residences into 2 types: family community residences and transitional community residences. Now you're going to notice in Georgia and elsewhere, an awful lot of cities and counties divide them based on the number of people living in the homes. That's what we did way back in 1974. We were struggling to figure out how to classify these. And we looked at the fire codes and realized they made a difference. They divided the fire code requirements for homes with 8 or fewer people and 9 or more people. It didn't take too long, but we eventually realized that made no sense. Zoning is all based on performance, as you well know. And it should be based on how the use performs. So the number of people up to a reasonable amount that we can be confident emulates a family doesn't really matter. It's how it performs. So we have family community residences that offer a relatively permanent tenancy. There's no limit on how long you can live in them. It's typically at least 6 months. So for example, group homes for people with developmental disabilities, they can live there a lifetime. People with mental illness, several years. People in recovery, several years. We have Oxford House in some cases out of New Jersey where the court noted they've got people living in them for 5 or 6 years. That's a pretty permanent living arrangement. These need to be allowed as a permitted use in all zoning districts where any residences are allowed, as long as it's located at least a typical block, that's 660 feet, or 9 lots, whichever is greater, from the closest existing community residence or recovery community, which is a whole different ball of wax, but very closely related. We know that's because, in part, all the studies that showed as long as they're at least a block apart, they have no impact on property values. And that's a legitimate goal of zoning, to protect property values. Because your home is, for most people, is the biggest investment you ever make. And again, as long as they're a block apart and licensed and certified, the studies are extremely consistent. No effect on property values, no effect on turnover rates, no effect on neighborhood safety. The licenses or certification, or Oxford House Charter, which Oxford houses are self-governed community recovery residences that have been extraordinarily successful. The recidivism rate, according to a study by DePaul University, after 3 years of moving out of an Oxford house was only 17%. That's extraordinarily successful. We need this licensing or certification to weed out the incompetent and the scam operators. The scam operators are everywhere. You can almost always identify them by them giving out free airline tickets to come to their home. The ones that don't charge rent, pretty sure to be a scam operator. The Phoenix area just went through a $3 billion Medicaid fraud with fake sober homes and treatment centers where the operators were kidnapping people off the Navajo reservation, putting them in these fake sober homes, keeping them on drugs or alcohol, and sending them to these fake sober treatment centers. So certification and licensing or an Oxford Charter are essential. And no more than 12 occupants, including live-in staff. Again, that's what we can feel very confidently can emulate a family. But if any of those three requirements to be a permitted use is not met, then you apply for a case-by-case review to give a further reasonable accommodation via special use permit, conditional use permit, special exception, or a dedicated reasonable accommodation process. Next slide, please. The transitional community residences have a higher turnover rate. It's typically limited to weeks or months. There are lots of homes out there where it's just 21 days. And those are generally for people coming straight out of detox. It's typically less than 6 months. These need to be permitted in all zoning districts where multifamily housing is allowed with the same 3 criteria. But we also have to allow them on a case-by-case basis in what I call pure single-family districts. Those would be districts where only detached single-family homes are allowed. And there are districts like that. That's where you apply for a case-by-case review. I want to make it really, really clear that the standards you use need to be very narrowly tailored to the reasons why you're requiring the review. And there are plenty of circumstances where, say, a community resident should be allowed within a spacing distance of another one. These are detailed in the study that was distributed to you, giving very clear guidance as to how to determine these. And I'm not going to try to cure insomnia by going into that kind of detail. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of the 2 approaches, the family community residences and the transitional community residences. Next slide. The bottom line, though, you need to know about the maximum number of people that can live in the home is that the local property maintenance code or minimum housing code or building code usually includes a provision to prevent overcrowding that applies to all residences. The usual formula is if there's 1 occupant of the sleeping area, you need 70 square feet, excluding closets. If it's more than 1 occupant of the sleeping area, you need 50 square feet per occupant. So if you're going to have 2 roommates in a bedroom, you need 100 square feet minimum. 3, you need 150 square feet minimum. This was upheld by the Supreme Court in 1996 in the Edmonds decision, where the court ruled that these kind of provisions that apply to all residences, you don't have to make a reasonable accommodation from them. Similarly, fire codes, and Ian has addressed this, or probably will address this. The majority opinion of the courts is that if the people in a community residence are capable of self-evacuation, then you cannot require a fire suppression system in the community residence just because it's people with disabilities. Now, if the jurisdiction requires fire sprinkler systems for all residential uses, that's one thing, that you still can require that. But you can't require it just for a recovery residence or a group home where the people are capable of self-evacuation in the event of emergency. This is so well settled. We actually have, I found in my files while I was cleaning them out, because I do have 50 years of accumulated files on this, an advisory opinion from the Attorney General of the state of Maryland back in 1973, 15 years before President Reagan's Fair Housing Amendments Act was passed, saying that exact same thing under the laws that existed then. And I think that the Fair Housing Amendments Act of '88 codified that principle. So next slide, please. I'd like to suggest that you consider, I stress the word consider, these next steps. 1, adopt statewide certification or licensing of recovery residences. Senator, your bill from the previous session is a good one. And I think it is really essential that just as the state requires licensing for group homes for people with developmental disabilities or mental illness, or for the frail elderly, that licensing or certification be required for recovery residences. What's important to remember, as Ian, I saw a little bit of his earlier testimony, stressed, these are vulnerable people. And we need to protect them from the incompetent operators, the scam artists, those that will abuse them, those that will steal their money, those that will keep them on drugs. And licensing or certification gives the state the opportunity to do that. And then I'd like to suggest, while you could, that provides the basis for the zoning scheme. There are court cases where, and they're recounted in footnotes in the study, and I guarantee you the study, if you try to read it in one study, that will cure insomnia, that have thrown out the sort of requirements that I've suggested be adopted here, because the city or county had no justification for them. So the sort of approach we've got here, in the ordinance I worked on for Fort Lauderdale a number of years ago, that was upheld by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. And in the district court decision, they referred to the study about 6 or 7 times as providing the justification for the zoning. What was interesting there, and I always have a good laugh about it, is that the sober home that was at issue was a permitted use.
Mhm.
The court case originated out of building code issues, and the attorneys, I think very foolishly and unstrategically, decided they also wanted to attack the zoning ordinance because they didn't want a regulation of recovery residences at all. So you have this, and then after you've had such a study done, then draft the statewide zoning based on the study's recommendations and findings. If you decide you want to go ahead without doing the study, the draft legislation that Al Johnson, head of the state's attorney's addiction task force in Florida, Terrell Pyburn, city attorney for Coconut Grove, who has worked closely with me over the last 7 or 8 years in Florida, and I have we've run it by the Florida Association of Recovery Residences that has endorsed it. A very responsible group. I want to emphasize also with the certification or licensing in Florida, which had a situation very similar to what you've got now in Georgia 15, 20 years ago. Their Florida Association of Recovery Residences is the state's entity for certifying recovery residences. And they are, I mean, use the technical legal term when they do certification, they are real tough asses. They will turn down operators who don't meet the standards. And as I've seen time and again, first in Prescott, Arizona, when we did some zoning in a simple 8-page licensing ordinance, and Delray Beach, the first city in Florida to adopt the zoning approach. Once this was adopted, the scam operators left town. And if you adopt this on the state level, the scam operators will leave Georgia. And given how fragile people in recovery, particularly early recovery, are and vulnerable they are, it would be a feather in your cap to get those scam operators out of Georgia by requiring certification or licensing. Next slide, please. For anyone who wants to get the study, just go to law, and you'll be able to find the study very quickly and easily. There's also a 45-minute webinar on this that's quite different than this presentation, actually. That's intended for local government officials to better understand the need and how to regulate community residences, including recovery residences. So in the infamous words of my longtime role model, that's all, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Lauber. I really appreciate the presentation. It was informative, and I appreciate your recommendations. Thank you for the references to the reference material. I'm sure we'll be reading through that and looking at it, and we'll keep you informed. Do you have any questions? Okay, it doesn't seem that we have any questions. You're welcome to hang on and listen, or take care of your back. Sorry you're having a tough time, and hope you get to feeling better.
Thank you. This getting old ain't for sissies, let me tell you.
Yeah. Well, you got the right physician giving you advice, so we feel good about that. Now, Ian, did you want to add to the,
I think
and if we could bring it more back into Georgia, the
100%.
experiences that you've had?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So taking it from the top, the overarching theme is that if something constitutes a family, established case law is that municipalities, counties, they shouldn't be able to say you can't be a recovery residence, okay? Just as it's almost it's a little serendipity. So before the last hearing that we had, we were dealing with Stevens County with the moratorium. 2 days ago, the city of College Park sent a nastygram to a fellow operator and friend, not only telling them that recovery residences are per se not allowed. They in writing, they put, there is no zoning mechanism, as Daniel was just discussing, reasonable accommodation process. There's not, you can get on your hands and knees and beg. You will never be allowed in our district for a recovery residence that is being proposed. It is not open. There are,
This here?
yeah,
Yeah.
there are no disabled residents residing in it. All that Halcyon House has done is told people, hey, we're in College Park. We're going to open up a residence for folks with substance use disorders who are in recovery. They're not actively using, and the city went on attack mode. The code enforcement was there in a period of 10 days. Code enforcement was sitting out there surveilling them, taking pictures. 10 days, every day. Code Officer Brown was outside taking pictures. And then they received this, which, as you see in the notice, threatens fines of $1,000 a day for every day that they're in non-compliance.
And up here, Senator Jackson, myself must stay in a forgiving mode
100%.
when municipalities make these types of decisions.
Understood.
Because sadly, throughout the years, the word ignorance has received a negative connotation.
Yep.
You know, if somebody wants to talk to me about certain faiths around the world, I would have to claim ignorance
Mhm.
in some of them.
Mhm.
And if someone wanted to talk about things that I'm very familiar with, then I'm very comfortable.
Mhm.
So obviously, I guess that we have to attempt to educate
Without a doubt.
some of these misguided municipalities around the state, would you say?
I would absolutely say, and
Because it's hard for me to imagine an incorporated city
mhm.
that did not allow any type of residencies for someone with, and here's where I think we have a fine line we have to cut, is someone with a disability.
Mhm.
And in some cases, what the individuals that we're trying to help aren't classified as disabled, if you will.
Mhm.
So I think that's one thing we have to nail down, and I think that would be a recommendation
In
that has to
terms-
come out in terms of recovery residences, exactly who they are housing.
Mhm.
Because I think you were here, I believe, well, I don't know if you were at the last meeting, but we had a spirited conversation
Mhm.
with an individual who's been in recovery for quite a while and been extremely successful.
Mhm.
And she clarified, she didn't mean it the way it sounded, but in my world, I know when you are an addict,
Mhm.
you are an addict
Uh,
forever.
Yes,
And so there, you know, it's not like they do a scan and all the tumors are gone.
precisely.
So, you know, that tumor never leaves. You keep it in remission, hopefully for as long as you can.
Mhm.
But there are the possibilities if certain actions occur, then you're right back at square one. So we have to define that because we've got some issues also in code and in policy when it comes to alcohol,
Mhm.
where alcohol is not considered a drug, if you will, but heroin is and
Precisely.
other things are, which you and I both know. I can manage somebody coming off heroin a whole lot easier than I can manage somebody coming off alcohol
Without question.
addiction. Yeah.
Without question.
And so that's the important part of these meetings is that we can pull these threads out and try to find an answer. And I promise you, this is not the first misguided, overzealous email that some municipality has sent out later to only be corrected and saying, yeah, you can't do that.
They're in the process of being educated
Yeah.
on what they can and can't do. Unfortunately, right? It's not what we want to spend our time doing, but
Well, it's
we will.
taxpayer dollars. It's
It
taxpayer
is.
dollars
And
of
it's
College
gonna
Park
hurt.
taxpayers
It
that
is.
are going to have to be done. And no offense to your professional background, but we know who makes the money off this. It's the guy with the law school degree. Yeah.
Unfortunately. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So all of that to say, I think that, the basic principle of if you are a family, no regulation. You cannot, there's no blanket bar. You know, they
But-
are a family.
But tell me, what do we run into when we define family?
When you define family, what's
Yeah.
the problem?
Yeah. What's the problem when we define family?
It's oftentimes it's too small. I mean,
Okay.
in terms of unrelated individuals.
So
that
give me your definition of a family.
A group of related or unrelated individuals who function as a single housekeeping unit. They share a kitchen, they cook together,
Okay.
they do chores together. They don't have like in a boarding house, for example, you've got locked rooms. It's like a hotel room, right? You don't have that in group homes. I mean, these are individuals who regularly interact with one another. They share the common spaces. And they're a unit. I mean, they go to they
So do we define family in Georgia law? I'm asking you, should we do that?
would I no, I would not define family. What I
Okay.
would do though is have an overarching X number of unrelated individuals. And Daniel might disagree with me on this front. Which you know, we do have our differences in views. We're
We do
attorneys.
too.
We're
occasionally.
opinionated, you know, so
We're both senators and we disagree.
No,
We disagree
I really
every
like
once in a while.
the construct that Tennessee has. I really like the notion of it's 8 in Tennessee plus 3 staff members.
Right.
8 disabled individuals plus 3 staff members. You are per se universally a single family dwelling, single family residence permitted in any district in which residents are permitted.
Okay, so using the Tennessee model,
Hmm.
okay, I know she has a family at home
Mhm,
and I have a family at home.
mhm.
And she and I both have unique aspects from our family that are unique from traditional families
Mm-hmm.
as far as our children and things of that nature. So we qualify under the Tennessee code as a family,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Your blood relatives.
Well, no, not always. No, that's the thing. We're not.
Okay.
That's the thing. She and I are in unique situations where we have children that are not our blood. So,
Also in the definition of family.
okay. So in Tennessee's code, does the word disability have to be in there?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. It is strictly to disabled individuals.
Okay, so family only in that aspect is different from what we would call the traditional family.
Yes.
Okay, so I couldn't move into one of your neighborhoods along with all my other biker friends
Precisely.
and start a motorcycle club
Exactly.
in a house
Mhm.
and have 3 staff members working in there.
Correct. No,
Okay.
no.
We have a
bicycles.
common kitchen, but we have people that manage it for us and that clean it for us and take care of it for us. So we're writing a definition that prohibits bad actors, not saying that motorcycle clubs are bad actors,
I hear.
or some, but so to prohibit, we're not creating a problem, right?
And I don't think so. And I think, again, if we take a step back and look at the intent behind this. So one, if it's universally applicable to everyone, right? Then disabled or non-disabled, it's going to apply. So in the bicycle or the biker club example, That's not, it's not discrimination to say that more than 4 people or whatever the family cap is, to say that you guys can't do that, because here's the code. The code says 4 unrelated individuals or less, that's all a family is, right? It's universally applicable. In the context of disabled individuals, the intent is to help. We know from 100 years of community residences, Oxford houses, and how the model has evolved, that living in a community with like-minded, similarly situated, similar experienced individuals, that is therapeutic. I mean, that is what
That's
it
the
helps
antidote.
them.
It's the
But,
medicine.
but you have to
That's
be
the medicine.
careful. You have to be careful on that description you just gave, because I could plug a motorcycle club into that, like-minded and this other stuff. So what we have to do is we're redefining the family, or redefining a family as related to someone with a physical or mental. And the word
So-
disability really,
The big.
yeah,
Overarching all of this is the
Yeah.
Fair Housing Act and the fact that disabled
yeah.
individuals are a protected class,
Yeah.
right? So if you want to talk about, do this in the context of race, again, it's a protected class. So you cannot discriminate on race. Bicycle and biker gangs,
yeah,
not a protected
yeah,
class.
motorcycle clubs.
Motorcycle
Yeah,
clubs.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's-
Um,
Yeah, because anytime somebody throws the word intent in, and with your background and our background, we understand intent can be manipulated fairly
absolutely.
easy. But Senator Jackson.
Yeah, so I missed a meeting, and so I apologize for that if this has been reviewed, but are people who are in active recovery, so they are not actively using but are in recovery, are they still classified as disabled under the Fair Housing?
100%.
Okay, so, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding from this presentation and really clear here that because folks who are in addiction or in recovery are disabled, but according to the Fair Housing Act, should have opportunities to be in congregational living. Is this the argument that's being put forward?
Yes. And that's what precedent supports.
And then your science, though, piece says that in order to do it effectively, you can't do it with as small as 4 is 4. Is that what I'm hearing? Because I think that's for my neighborhood, that would be the crux, right? Like, sure, you could have 4 unrelated individuals living in a home in recovery, no problem. But you want 8 grown people who have a history of recovery. That's where I think the NIMBYism shows up.
For sure.
So can you just speak a little bit more to that science of why you need it to be more than 4 people?
I think that, so Daniel, if you want to chime in on this as well, by all means, I can tell you as an operator,
Yeah.
it's 2 prongs. So there is the therapeutic component of being with more than, more the merrier, up to what Daniel said has been
12.
Yes. And then everybody is confident that, 12 is you go more than 12 people, it doesn't feel like a family.
And to be clear, the 12 could include 3 full-time staff members.
Correct.
So we can say 9.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. As an operator, 4 people isn't financially viable. And here's what I mean by that, okay?
Mhm.
An overarching theme, I think, that we're all discussing is that recovery residences shouldn't be limited to certain areas of a state where housing is much cheaper, right? Inner city area. I don't want to misspeak or say anything inappropriate, but where not affluent areas, right? There should be recovery residences in affluent areas, and those have a certain price tag associated with the houses. 4 people, it's not a financially viable, not from a profit making standpoint, but from you're burning, it just doesn't work.
And for full disclosure, most of your recovery residences are in affluent areas.
Are you asking, or is that a statement?
Just asking.
Let's make it both. I'm asking you to verify what I believe.
Mine? You're
Yeah.
saying 100, yes.
Yeah, yours.
Yes,
Person.
I thought you were
Yeah.
saying in Georgia. And I was
No,
like,
no. I'm talking yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
The houses are.
Yeah, the houses.
And then our apartments
Apartments.
still, Sandy
Yeah.
Springs.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah.
Can I push back a little
Yeah.
bit? So my neighbors are not actually interested in your ability to make a profit. So that's no longer like the financial viability piece. While I understand it means a lot to you and is important, my constituents don't care about that. And so I need, and I do, I'm actually very sensitive to that. However, I need to know the science. I need to know the experience behind it that tells me that you cannot do this successfully under what my neighbors believe is reasonable, which is having 4 non-related adults. I don't want to be contentious with you. I'm just very mindful. I get calls about this.
Yes, ma'am.
I've supported legislation that like pad split and things like that, and my constituents hate me for it.
Yeah.
And so I just need to make sure I have really good, hard facts as to why I'm willing to support having more than 4 unrelated
That's
individuals in
fine.
a home.
And limit us to 4, and I close all my houses.
Well, let me ask
That's
you this.
necessity.
In,
Limit us to 4 and we disappear.
And-
Period.
and-
Hard stop.
in pushback being an important part of this process, why wouldn't I come in and you go, Senator Robertson, I can't make it on 4. And I look at you and say, well, you're not charging enough then. Which is what we would tell, which is a bigger fight we get into where I have an independent pharmacist that opens up on a corner and he opens up across from a national chain and he goes, hey, they get a better price than me. And I said, well, maybe you picked the wrong spot to build your pharmacist in. So I'm telling you, you say, and I'll say, is there another place that you could set up your residency where you could make a profit by getting up to 8?
I'm not in this to make a profit, guys. That's what y'all.
Okay,
that's-
then tell us where the viability runs into. Is it just paying the base bill to operate?
So let's say one of my houses, for example, I won't say which one, $6,000 note payment, about 900 in power a month. Call it 100 for YouTube TV, call it 100 for natural gas. You got staff. So when you take it and you prorate all of my staff costs across the houses, let's say 900 a month, give or take. Right there, you are at 8,500 to 9,000 a month in just operating expenses. Okay. Do the math. If you put 4 people in one of those houses,
Mhm.
doesn't work. You've got, it just, even somebody who is extremely wealthy, they're going to say $2,500 to live in a house of 4 people. Like, I can't justify that. We are in this we have to be realistic in the notion that like sober living is a need. There are people who need it, but again, that would be price gouging, in my humble opinion.
Well,
But I-
who's the wealthy person that says I can't afford the 2,500? Is that somebody going into recovery or somebody supporting a family member in
Both.
recovery? Well, let me ask you this, and please understand, these are the questions that she and I are going to get.
I love it.
cut-
And we need to
because-
talk about
so,
it.
So tell me this, what is the value of recovery then? If I've got a relative that needs to be recovered, and by the way, we're going to jump over just a second because Daniel does have his hand up on Zoom, but what's the price of recovery? What's the price of living a sober life?
So let's take a step back and look at the majority of your constituents. Look at the up to 90th percentile of your constituents. Who can afford that?
But do you see what you're doing? You're making the case for us to establish these in less affluent areas.
But
Because-
that's not desirable.
Well, I understand it's not desirable, but if we're doing it from a cross point, from a price point, then what we're saying is I can go into a neighborhood where property values are less
Mhm.
and I can afford to charge less to move somebody in there. And you know what? They won't have YouTube TV.
Okay.
They won't have these other things that, believe it or not, some people that live in parts of my district and live in
Yeah.
parts that don't have anyway.
Okay.
And these are people not in recovery. These are people in day-to-day life.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So at what point does, and I'll throw the C word out. At what point does capitalism come into it in a free market? And we say, that has to be part of the conversation.
So in these areas, never mind.
Okay.
I
Well, let's let
think- can I-
Daniel real quick. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, and maybe, may I ask this question
Yeah,
actually
go
to
ahead, go
Daniel?
ahead, yeah.
So I'm asking, 'cause
Daniel, this question is to you also.
to you, because you hinted at this in your presentation, Mr. Daniel, that there is some type of clinical efficaciousness in having more than 4 people. And that's what I want to hear spelled out more clearly. The financial, I am sympathetic to the need for these to operate financially. Please hear that. I am sympathetic, but my neighbors are not. So I want to know about the clinical benefits, the efficaciousness of having between 8 and 12 individuals. Why is that more clinically effective? Is there science that backs that so that I can verify, like, we cannot clinically do this well with only 4 people. We need a bigger household. That's the information that I'm trying to get from you all that I need in order to support to support this.
And Daniel, I'm so sorry to chime in here, but one thing I'll also say is that the financial viability component, that's not Ian up here talking as a capitalist. That is
Oh, no, he froze.
you're going to hear local control more than you've ever heard in your life,
Mhm.
even though
Mhm.
zoning that they have are powers that were abdicated to them by the state government. And so clawing those powers back are going to be brutal.
Mhm.
But we
Yes,
can't lose sight of what our goal is.
100%.
Our goal is not to take control away from local government. Our goal is to treat individuals, because when John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan sent all of these responsibilities back to the community, it was a great idea, but we have not built all the bridges necessary to make it a success.
Agreed.
And so that's where my heart lies through this process. So do we have you back, David or Daniel?
I'm in the immortal words of, I forget which movie it was. We're back.
Okay, I think that was Poltergeist, but
Yes, that's
I
the
do
one.
appreciate the demonic reference.
Yeah.
So Senator Jackson.
Yes, thank you for coming back. I'm glad that the internet is back up, because I had a question. I think you probably heard it before, around the clinical efficaciousness of having more than 4 people. I'm wondering if you could speak to that. And then the second question that came up along this was also, can you talk about Florida's use of the Florida Association of Recovery Residents as their licensing agency? How has that worked? Because I think I share Senator's concerns about what it means for us to have an outside agency doing that for us. So, those are my 2 kind of underlying questions for you.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm glad we were able to get back. Generally, 8 to 12 people are needed in recovery residences, just as they are in group homes for people with mental illness. The idea is to increase the opportunities to bond with another resident. That's very important for recovery, and provide mutual support. And this is really important, to reduce the chances of someone being home alone. With all due respect to Macaulay Culkin, it's not a good thing. It's very risky to be home alone when you're in recovery. It's also risky when you have mental illness. This gets discussed in the study. You had also both asked about the financial viability and therapeutic viability. On page 112, footnote 10 of the study, there's about 7 or 8 or 10 citations to court decisions that have ruled that you need to allow additional people when it's necessary to achieve financial or therapeutic viability. And financial viability isn't, it's the way they viewed it in the courts is you need to be able to make enough money from operating the sober homes that it's your only job. This is a full-time job, and the operator shouldn't be required to live in poverty. Just like everything else in a capitalist society like ours, there has to be some financial incentive to undertake a job or a business. So you can't expect the owner to have to live in poverty or hold a second job. It's full time. The only ones making a big fortune out of recovery are the large corporations that are getting into the recovery industry. They're the ones that are putting 8 or 9 recovery residences right next to each other, having minimal staff shared between them. The mom and pop operators, just about all of whom are people in recovery who are seeking to give back, which is a goal under just about every religion. They're having a tough time, a lot of them. I also want to make it really clear, the people who live in these homes, they're on hard times. They're not going to have the money to spend to pay $1,000 or more a month to live in the home and get the support, mutual support that they need to achieve normalization. In other words, living a fairly normal lifestyle and integrate into the community, make the connections necessary in the community to live a normal lifestyle. And their families are not going to be wealthy. I mean, there are some luxury sober homes. The one sober home in Cave Creek, Arizona, where I wrote the zoning there with a wonderful city attorney, they've got one sober home. It's a luxury one. It's $20,000 or $30,000 a month to live there. These are for really wealthy people. The vast majority of these, you're looking at maybe $200 a week, $150 a week. We're not talking about people who are wealthy, because if you're fallen so deep into addiction, you're not able to hold a job. You're spending all this money on the drugs or alcohol. You don't have a lot of financial resources. And it's really important for these homes to be able to locate in safe, relatively normal, preferably middle-class neighborhoods where the neighbors can serve as role models. The problem that we've had, senators, is that, and this goes back to when I first got involved in this, got suckered into this back in 1974, is that group homes, and particularly sober homes, would locate in poor neighborhoods, often minority neighborhoods, often around colleges and universities, where there was less political power to keep them out. What's needed in every state is an even playing field. So while I know there is a reluctance, and I'm not a big fan of statewide zoning in general, but when you've got a situation where so many jurisdictions are frustrating your goal of facilitating recovery and reclaiming these people's lives, that's when it's kind of necessary to act at the state level and level the playing field throughout the state. I don't say you should define family statewide, leave that up to each city, but at least level the playing field statewide, so these homes can locate anywhere in the state and don't get really jammed into lower income or lesser income neighborhoods, because that doesn't really, that's not fair to anybody.
Thank you, Daniel. And I have to say this, public service announcement is now 10:20, October 17th, 2025, and we're back online. I don't need Jackson mad at me and bringing legal action against me from Senate Press. All right. And quick question. Tell me what's bad about clustering.
It reduces the chance that you're going to interact with people in the neighborhood who are essential. A core characteristic of a group community residence is using the neighbors without disabilities as a role model. And you're only
So do we prohibit clustering?
Yes, the idea, you don't allow clustering. That's why that's the key reason we have the spacing distances. We know if it also can reduce property values. And
But
think about
you
it.
mentioned earlier that there were developers who had developed properties just for that sole purpose, right?
They're bad.
Right.
Well, no, he doesn't.
No,
Yeah.
there have been operators that have gone and clustered because they're interested in the money. They are not interested in the sobriety.
Okay, but my thing to that, if they go in and a zoning allows them to cluster like that, and look, we appreciate the money that's there and the money that's not there. Can't there be those actors that actually want to provide a place for as many people as possible in order to actually save money by concentrating their resources in a cluster area also? Couldn't
Well, here's the
that be a
catch.
viable reason?
Senator, here's the catch. It changes the nature of the neighborhood. Think about the household, the family that's got a house, they've put their life savings into it, and suddenly there's a community residence to the east of them and to the west of them, to the north and the south of them. If you think they're going to have an easy time selling their house, you're kidding yourself. It's going to really hurt their property values, and it's going to change the character of the neighborhood. They're going to wind up feeling like they're in the middle of an institution.
But psychologically, when we're talking about the caps, the 4-person cap, and we're looking at 8 to 12, there is a certain, and this is me playing devil's advocate, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is a certain benefit psychologically to the fact that you have even more. You have, 36 or 42 individuals in the general area that are all going through the same thing, right?
Well, as we explained in the study, that starts to create an institutional atmosphere. It reduces the residential atmosphere of the neighborhood. And I think it's not fair. We're trying to create a fair and balanced system so that the people of the neighborhood retain their neighborhood characteristics, retain their property values, retain their safety, retain their normal turnover rates, and the people in recovery or with other disabilities have a safe neighborhood to live in where they are in a totally residential atmosphere. So, there will be circumstances where, for example, we have, say, a 660-foot spacing distance, which is a typical block in America, where you might allow, by special use permit, another community residence to locate within the spacing distance. You could have a recovery residence, and then 4 doors down within the spacing distance, someone wants to open up a group home for frail elderly. That probably should get approved. I wouldn't recommend approval of another sober home that close because the residents are likely to interact only with each other in the two homes. But if it's a frail elderly one, the residents are not likely to interact together. And we've gotten in Scottsdale, we've gotten homes approved when you've had a sober home and a senior home within 400 feet of each other. The city has approved that by special use permit because we were able to make the very clear case that the residents are not going to interact together, so they won't interfere with the normalization of each group. So among the standards we have when we write up these ordinances or state legislation is to locate within a spacing distance. We look at the actual on the ground distance between the existing home and the proposed home, but we also look at the composition, the disabilities served. And if they're different disabilities and they're not likely to interact solely with the people in the other group home, then we say it should be approved. But if it's the same disability, then you got to be really cautious about it. And again, we want it fair and balanced. We know from all the research, as long as they're at least a block apart and licensed or certified, no problems. Once you start getting closer together, you have issues develop.
And Daniel, have you run into many problems around the country dealing with homeowners associations?
All the time. And I've got a 5-page long list of court decisions going back even before the Fair Housing Act was amended by President Reagan to cover community people with disabilities, ruling that the group home had to be allowed despite the homeowner association's restrictions. In fact, one of the first cases I ever served as an expert witness in was in Oklahoma, where their legislature had, I believe, passed a law prohibiting homeowner associations from excluding community residences for people with disabilities. We never even had to present our side of the case. But it gave me a great chance to have some really good stakes in Oklahoma. I realized how mediocre they actually are in Chicago. But don't tell anyone in Chicago.
I would like to pivot back to this communications from College Park that you included in our packet. The underlying statement here, I think I just need to be let in. It sounded like our state laws currently make this type of action illegal. And so I would like to just hear you talk through, because one of the things I hear you all asking is for some zoning reform, but it sounds like we don't need zoning reform to address this. So just talk me through, what is it in the state law now that exists that should allow the Halcyon house to be able, Halcyon?
Yeah.
Halcyon, thank you. House to be able to operate in College Park.
Yep.
And then, what tweaks or changes to zoning statewide would we need it? Yeah, just help me distinguish those two.
And before I do that, yes,
know
ma'am, can I revert back to something
can
just
do
to
it.
clarify? Clustering, so I want to, and Daniel jump in, but I want to clarify and make it abundantly clear that recovery communities, which are the multitude of, let's say, 4 individuals in apartments or complexes, they do have a place. Daniel would argue that they absolutely have a therapeutic place. What we're talking about right now is single-family neighborhoods.
No, I understand. And I did not consider apartment facilities as clustering.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay,
It's
perfect.
entirely different. Yeah, I was just talking about residential.
And
Yeah.
because he would argue that, and I would argue that the multifamily model, if in a district that is zoned for multifamily, it's consistent, it fits. So you're not throwing a wrench into the overarching zoning intent.
Well, when we're up here, we have to anticipate so many things. And right now, there are corporations coming in and buying entire neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And there's been pushback on corporations buying entire neighborhoods, and they rent them all out to everybody.
Mhm.
And I do see an opportunity where if somebody came in and they said, well, hey, look, we have 12 homes that we have been unable to rent. Why don't we look at this as possibly an opportunity to get that property in there? And then, of course, they would look to tax incentives and everything else in order to make it viable for them, but could theoretically create a cluster within one of those corporately owned neighborhoods. And so that was just a point of clarification. I wanted somebody to tell me, yeah, you're right, yeah, you're wrong, or here's why our opinion is that can't happen.
That would be a
So,
cluster.
Yeah,
Daniel would
Yeah.
argue that that's very problematic.
yeah,
We could talk about my irrelevant views on that, I
Yeah.
mean, at a different time. But yeah,
okay.
their entire neighborhoods do not need to be converted into community residences. I
Right.
am on that side of the argument.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine an entire neighborhood, but I could imagine in a situation like a corporately owned neighborhood where
Correct.
there would be opportunities. If somebody's willing to pay the rent, they'll rent it.
Right.
Yeah.
Going back to your question, Senator Jackson, you said what is it that makes that illegal per se?
Yes.
Let's start with the Constitution.
Which
Okay.
one?
Substantive due process, right? What they are effectively doing right there
Yeah.
is they're saying, hey, you bought a house, guess what? We heard you're going to use it for something. We're going to start tacking on $1,000 a day fine.
Yes.
So on top of that, then you got the Fair Housing Act. Again, because there is nothing to say that the individual that owns Halcyon House wasn't just going to put 3 people in there, which College Park permits. Okay. And so my advice as the encourager of the good fight was put 3 people in there, see what they do. And if they do that, then you've got Fair Housing Act violations galore, right?
Yeah.
And ADA. So we don't even have to get to the state level. It's a federal, well-established precedent law states that constitutionally, which could potentially render public officials personally liable for breaching that. Just going to throw that out there on the record. And then the Fair Housing Act. And Georgia does have a legislation that mirrors the Fair Housing Act on the books. It does. But I think that from a precedent and ammunition standpoint, if you will, federal is where you go with it.
And so just so I'm clear, then the actual rub here is when people get beyond that, whatever the city's cap is for non-related individuals. That's the rub where you would like for us as a state to preempt local zoning laws for, we need to name this as preemption. And, you know, you talking to somebody who, you know, typically doesn't vote for preemption things. So, but that's where it's, because this Halcyon House would be in compliance, would not need any type of state intervention at all if they have less than 3 people, or have 3 people, if they have 3 people or less who are unrelated. If they want to be financially viable, as you've told me, they're going to want to have more than that. And that's where they need zoning changes.
Precisely. And the reason for that is it's already law that they can't. You guys don't have to do a thing to say that 3 people or less is permitted. That's law. That's what the Fair Housing Act is for.
Mhm.
It's the delta between 4 and whatever you guys deem emulates a family that we're pushing for, right? So 4 to 12, give or take. That's where the That's where the rub is. And in this particular instance, just so we understand, kind of the gravity of what the operators are dealing with. This particular operator, was receiving calls from neighbors faking that they were individuals in recovery, saying, I'm a ex-heroin addict, I need a house, do you have availability?
Mm.
As soon as they said yes, they basically said, gotcha, calling zoning.
Mm.
And on the record, this has reached the mayor. So this has been escalated. This emergency of a recovery residence opening has been escalated to the mayor. And it's coming from the top down.
Well, and let's be clear, and because due process is extremely important to me, the person was advertising.
Yeah.
Based on information that they received, they were
Precisely.
advertising themselves as a recovery house. So having been a part of government and knowing I was doing this, and I assume you do it too, when you open your residences, is they did not engage with the city to do their due diligence on the front end to make sure that they were in compliance, or to kind of pull this argument up early on because they're in an R2 residential area, zone residential. And the city did a preemptive investigation based on, I'm sure, what you're talking about, neighbors calling in and all this, plus being given digital advertisements where this person was advertising it. So, I mean, both sides probably could have took a path less, adversarial, but nonetheless, the individual apparently has not had a hearing in front of a zoning board or anybody else.
Hasn't put a person in the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. And
Hasn't
so,
put a person in the
yeah.
house.
and so they're telling them that the $1,000 fines up to $1,000 a day. Let's see, the unlawful operation of all violations within Appendix A of the city codes. 15 calendar days from the date of this notice to bring the property into full compliance. Into full compliance of what? The house is empty, right?
It's not out of compliance.
That's
Yeah.
why it's constitutional.
Yeah, yeah,
You know-
okay, yeah. And there's nothing, what is full compliance?
We don't.
Because
know.
right now they're fully compliant.
As far as I'm concerned, and as far
Because
as I'm
nobody's living
concerned,
there.
he's only gonna put 3 people in there. This
Yeah.
individual financial viability is only 3 people, and tell me that's illegal.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
And so just to make sure I've wrapped this up in a pretty bow. In order for us to have recovery houses throughout the state of Georgia, which what we want, right? Like, we don't want someone who lives out in Columbus having to travel 5 hours to. Could you still be in Georgia if you travel 5 hours?
Augusta.
Augusta.
Augusta, I think maybe 30 hours. I'm not sure. It's a long way.
You've never been there before.
Oh, no, that's the problem. I've driven that drive. It feels like 30 hours.
So you don't want someone from Columbus having to drive all the way to Augusta in order to get into a recovery house, right? So our goals here in terms of government good, right? What's good for all of us is to be able to have recovery residents scattered across the state and in varying economic neighborhoods, right? So middle class, affluent neighborhoods should also be able to have these recovery locations.
Yep.
The only way to do that is to have enough people who it will be unrelated people who will violate local zoning codes, because there'll be more than 4 people. Are there cities that have preemptively, like on their own, created special use permits to allow this to happen? So there are some cities that are making these residential houses legal within their realm, or is everybody just kind of operating quietly? Because I suspect that's
What's there's stuff on the books that makes them look good if you review their ordinances, right? Like, I think Kennesaw has something that expressly talks about Gar, Marietta, their
There
ordinances.
was another one,
Yeah.
a county government
Yep.
adopted GAR standards.
Yep. And so there are some local officials who have put this on the books. Here, there's what's on paper, and then there's reality, though, right? And so, in my experience, even if, say, Cobb County or Kennesaw or Marietta, even if they have that on the books, if you go to apply for a special use permit, they're like, good luck,
Well,
and so
And that's my question to the special use permit. Isn't that kind of case to case, and
it should be
it,
very fact specific.
But that's what I'm saying though. It has to be extremely specific because they pick winners and losers when we start talking about special use permits, right?
Yes,
I mean,
very much so.
just because my house is painted yellow and her house is painted white,
Mhm.
then she could possibly get it and I not.
Mhm.
So special use permits make me nervous.
And Daniel, do you want to wait? No, his hand's up already. I didn't know
Yeah.
that, but yeah,
Yeah.
his work is incredible on, okay, so if it's not a permitted use by right, now here's where we are in a framework. And so Daniel, if you want to chime in, by all means.
Thank you, Senator. As I said in my presentation, the key thing is that these need to be allowed, we got that basic principle from all the court cases that whatever regulation you do for community residences for people with disabilities, whether it's the state level or the city or county level, it's got to be the least drastic means needed to actually achieve the legitimate government interests, which I have spelled out. And that least drastic means is allowing, for example, the family community residences as a permitted use in every zoning district where residences are allowed, as long as they meet the spacing distance, licensing or certification, or an Oxford House charter, and they don't have more than 12 people. It's only when they want to locate within a spacing distance, there is no license or certification available, or they want to have more than 12 people, that they would need to go through a case-by-case special use permit review. And even then, you need narrowly crafted standards, not the usual special use standards, but narrowly crafted standards based on the reason why you're requiring that special use review to make the decision. I want to, if I may, Senator Jackson had asked about the experience with the Florida Association of Recovery Residences, and I apologize for not getting to that earlier. So far, it's been really good. They are tougher on the operators than the state licensing agencies are on the operators of the group homes that they license. The way FAR is doing this, which is really clever, is they give initial provisional certification when they receive acceptable paperwork about how the recovery residence is going to operate. After it's been operating for 3 months, they do a site inspection and they interview a good number of current and former staff and current and former residents to find out what their experiences have been. It's only after they pass that and meet their website, far.org, has all these criteria. It's pages long, largely derived from the National Association for Recovery Residences. Only when they pass that do they get their annual certification. And each year they go through this again and again. So if you look in the study, you'll see a in the section about recovery communities, you'll see a picture of these 4 buildings. It's an overhead picture. They're the ones with the dark colored roofs. Each one had 24 people in recovery in them. They were denied certification, in part because they were giving away plane tickets to come there. They weren't charging rent. And charging rent is a key component of recovery. It's part of taking responsibility, something that is very, very important in recovery. And it was a scam. They were denied certification. They have a number right now of applicants that are not going to get approved because they are not adhering to the very strict standards. I think that when you've got people who themselves are in lifelong recovery and have lived in these recovery residences, being the ones who are doing the inspections and making the decisions, you're way ahead of the game. Being
Mr.
able to
Glover,
ensure that that these are operated safely and the residents are protected.
just some logistics here. So does the state pay FAR to be the investigatory? Is it state dollars or Florida taxpayer dollars going to this entity to be the investigatory body that licenses? Like, how is this working logistically? That's my question here.
I think that the state
Like contracts with them, maybe?
provide contracts with them. They don't get a lot of money from the state. Most of their money is from the fees to apply for certification.
And that's the way GAR is set up. The Georgia Association is set up through these certification fees. But in Georgia right now, it is voluntary. It is not mandatory. So that would have to be an adjustment made by that if the Department of DBHDD wanted to contract with GAR to do that.
Now
Senator
you do,
In your wisdom, are you aware of other licensors that come through an outside entity that's outside of the state?
I think there are some licensing boards that have been set up as
Like quasi-governmental?
tools to be used for, if you get into some of the skills licensing,
Mhm.
you know, they go through the plumbing boards and the HVAC boards and all this other kind of stuff that work in conjunction with the state
Okay,
license.
so there is
Yeah.
precedent for that.
Right, right.
Okay. Thank you. I just
Yeah,
didn't
no,
know
no.
that knowledge.
Because you and I always have seemed to always challenge that when we are about to put the name of some association into legislation, because we don't trust how long that association is going to be there. And if it goes away, then you and I are replowing the same ground later.
Daniel, are state bars, are our licenses independent associations that
Yes.
oversee our professions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In Georgia, in Georgia, it's mandated bar. In some
But
states, it's
that's-
voluntary bar. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just needed some examples to help me wrap my head around this possibility.
Well, and you know, y'all work for the Supreme Court, so the bar does, yeah.
That's it.
Or works with the Supreme Court,
Right.
yeah. That's a good point. Anything else? Well, Ian, I did tell you, Daniel, I want to thank you again. I hope your back gets feeling better. And Ian, thank you for coming in a few meetings ago and engaging. And again, we're going to drag you through this process as we go through it. And I look forward to seeing you at the November meeting when I'm going to invite the Georgia Municipal Association and the Association of County Governments to come in. Yeah, Senator Jackson.
Yeah, so I'm very concerned about preemption
Yep.
and what a steep hill you all are asking us to climb. And so I'm curious, has anyone tried to work with each individual county where these places are going for them to update their ordinances so that you don't require us to be heavy-handed and apply this to 159 counties?
Through lawsuits. I mean,
Only
that's-
through lawsuits?
Well, we had one group come in and testify, and he ran a faith-based recovery residence, and I think you may have been here. It's something house. I can't remember. Because I was really banging them around about, is faith-based the only way to do this? And he got with the county government, and the county government wrote an ordinance that basically, because they had another group try to come in and set up something that was obviously a bad actor, but the county government headed it off. So there was a county ordinance. Our concern is we would have 159 county ordinances and then ever how many municipal ordinances, and some would be good actors. So some would be what we're dealing with here,
Mhm.
and some would be more in line with the Constitution and with state law. So,
Agreed. And
but a template would not be a bad thing.
right. And
Yeah.
the reason I said lawsuits is because that's just, I guess I've just picked the, the poke the bears. But yes, I think, I don't know that like Kennesaw or some of the ones that do incorporate GAR, I don't know if that was because somebody did work with them to get that pushed through or not. But to Senator Robertson's point, I mean, you're looking at 159 counties, however many municipalities. And that's kind of the problem of what we're dealing with right now is that, Sandy Springs says one thing, Johns Creek says another, and
Okay.
there's no cohesiveness.
Well, I drove by a house near a hospital in Columbus that used to be they sold fabric. And then all of a sudden they had a sign out front that had John 3:16 or some Bible scripture on the front of it, John 3:16 House of Recovery. And it just picked my brain, and I said, let me find out what that is. And I said, well, gee, I could have done that and went and hung my CIT certificate on the wall and started inviting people to come in there and sit for 9 hours a day and charge every one of their families $50 a day for them to come and hang out at my house and call myself a recovery center. And that's where I started realizing that, I mean, this is a legitimate problem. Right now, our jails are the biggest recovery centers in our communities. And there are people taking advantage of these families that are really trying to get their family help. And so, and then Dr. Kirkpatrick has always been very concerned about this due to situations there in her county. And so I'm afraid of the patchwork, but to Senator Jackson's point, we are at least as leaders of this state required to put some kind of template out there, some guardrails saying this is the model that we should all be
Bare
following.
minimum.
And that, because I promise you, the last thing
Yeah.
she and I want to do is write legislation
Mhm.
to where, because I promise you, we'll write it and for the next 3 years, we'll be perfecting it
Mhm.
if it gets signed. So,
Yeah, I mean, that really is my point. I'm not sure that you all are aware of the political lift that you're trying to accomplish by coming to us. I mean, it is massive
Understood.
to try
Appreciate
to
it.
try to get legislation of this preemptive nature applied. You are fighting against principalities on high. And so if you can work with your local municipalities with a clear template, maybe GAR can help create that and go, I know it's a long slog, but honestly, it might happen faster than getting legislation out of this body that's helpful.
which I think the conversation at the next meeting is going to be important to move in that direction, to have all the parties in the room. Because, you know, me personally, I know I'm extremely non-controversial when it comes to being in a state senate. Yeah, I don't think I've ever carried controversial legislation.
I'm
ever-
sure he will carry.
ever said
easily.
or ever said anything inappropriate. But Senator Jackson is very safe,
Yeah.
and I'm being very facetious. She's not.
Oh,
But
okay.
so if we're two, if we two are saying we know there's a path of least resistance that we think we can bring everybody together and do this, we're being very serious about
Okay.
that. And so I think we can help with that.
Okay.
Yeah. But thank you, Ian. Thank you, Daniel. And what else? Do you have the sign-in sheet? Is there anybody else here that did not sign in that wanted to come up and offer any testimony related to anything when it comes to addiction recovery residences or anything dealing with addiction recovery? You're more than welcome.
Listen, we had to drive all the way down here. Y'all might as well come and talk. It's not
Yep.
very often there's an open call.
And when we say we, how far did you drive?
13 whole miles.
Yep. And I only drove 113 miles. So, but if anybody has anything they want to say, any concern about anything we've discussed today, or just offer any testimony, you're more than welcome to come up. But I'm not going to offer again. Yeah, absolutely. Come on up to the mic.
Mhm.
I'll see in house.
Yeah.
I'm no expert.
It's okay.
Well, and that's the reason you're here is because we are not experts either. We want you to
Okay.
educate us.
I'm just,
Can you tell us your name?
Yeah, tell us your name and who you're with.
my name's Kai Thorpe. I actually operate the Halcyon House. And so I've been.
Wait, you operate what?
The Halcyon House.
Well, apparently you don't because
That's correct.
there's nobody living there,
I'm
right?
attempting to.
Yes,
operate
yes.
The Halcyon House, and I just bring it up, and I don't have a lot of experience at it yet. They haven't allowed me to, but I'm happy to.
So do you mind answering a few questions for us?
I will try my best.
Okay, tell us about the birth of this project, if you will.
I actually come to sober living residences kind of different than most people I've found. A lot of folks go through recovery and open a house, or they've had some sort of life event that there's a wonderful woman who has a few houses whose brother was killed in a drunk driving accident. I come to it completely different. I've never been through recovery. I don't have family in recovery. My day job is a location manager for movies and television. So I do know how to insert myself into a community and make it all work. And I've had some experience in real estate investing, like creative finance sort of real estate investing. And I've been doing that more lately. And I was shown, somebody who's tried to sell me some co-living spaces, and when I was there, I kind of recoiled from it a bit. It was not being run correctly. It was essentially a flop house. And I just thought, well, this is terrible, but co-living. I came across sober living and I said, now that's something. And I started looking into that, and what I was seeing I know the mentality of a lot of real estate investors. They're thinking beds, cutting corners, and more beds, more money, and it's a profit driven thing. I know what they're thinking, and I was seeing some of these places run terribly. It's the bunk beds. They're chopping up like a 3-2 into a 8, 7 or whatever. Like the garage is 4 more beds. And it's just, they were thinking of money and beds, not humans. And then there's some places that are actually even run in good faith, and they just seem so sad, like here's your bed, here's your spoon, and that's it. And it's just, small living space, bare walls and things like that. And I just thought, well, let's go the other way. Let's go find a nice house. The house we found is beautiful. The family who's renting it to us are wonderful. They're completely behind this, and it's just I learned recently the opposite of addiction is connection. I think it kind of came up in this conversation. What this house has is it's 2 living rooms, it's 2 decks. We got a family style table so people can eat together if they want to. It's a backyard with a fire pit, all these things that ping pong table, everything to encourage connection with the other housemates and all that. And, we do have rules. It's a type 2 that is managed is the idea if we were able to do it.
Define the type 2. Define the type 2.
I jokingly say type 1 is like Lord of the Flies. It's like put 4 people together and govern
And some
yourselves.
kid dies. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah. So type 2.
Oxford, it has varying degrees of success.
Right.
I've had a conversation with one of the recovery centers here who has some apartments, and her, what she was telling me is they need structure. The apartments aren't working well for them. They need these people to have structure.
You're going type 2.
Type 2 is
Yeah.
structure. So we don't do counseling on property. We don't do anything medical on property. If you distill it, I'm just a landlord. But what we have on property is curfew, rules, chores. You can't sleep till noon, lights out at a certain time. You must participate. There's a weekly house meeting, so you do have some governance, you can vote someone off the island if there's problems. You do have a house.
Now, that is not true, right?
That's
The
well,
landlord's the only one that moves somebody out, right?
yeah, but they have a say. The house, if there's the goal is everybody is safe and successful. If there's somebody disrupting that, whether they're making the payments on the rent or not, they need to go because it disrupts the entire house. And they have a say, a weekly say on the you're not doing your dishes like you're supposed to.
And I'm
do
gonna
that.
throw throw something in there. Is there no dispossessory rights to an individual living in one of these residences, Mr. Attorney?
That's a fantastic question.
Okay, maybe that's something we need to.
Your legislation that you proposed previously is necessary in that regard.
Okay, yeah.
Landlord tenant.
Yeah, landlord tenant. Okay, good. I just want to make sure I was, I know what you were saying, voting
Sure.
off the island. You were, I
Silly.
understand. I'm being, no, your sense of humor and mine would line up well. But I do, as we pull out of that, we do have to, that is something that Senator Jackson and I'll have to
Yeah.
consider. Yeah.
Well, everybody there is signing on to these rules. They're
Right.
all agreeing.
They have a lease,
Exactly.
if you will.
Yeah, if they can't do those things, follow those rules, and there's interview process and vetting and in our case, we're not looking for somebody coming straight out of prison, for example. There's probably better or in detox or something like that. There's probably better places for them than this. This is kind of at the end, to be facetious again, I equate what I've learned about the recovery process. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Caesar's Palace. You go on this long treadmill with all these beautiful fountains and pillars, and you go through these doors and it's noise and lights and all this, and you entertain yourself and all that. When it's done, you spit out of the back in the parking lot.
Yeah.
That's kind of recovery, and we're giving a soft landing when they're kind of spit out the back so that they have an opportunity to continue recovery among other people in the same process, save some money, get a leg up, and
So how does someone find out about your residence if we're not like, because I know we have Thor where if somebody coming out of the system or somebody around the state wanted to find a recovery residence for somebody, they could be recommended there, including the Department of Community Supervision, i.e. probation, would reach out and say, hey, we've got a guy, because people coming out of prison are not in the intense recovery. They have already recovered. I mean, they have
Yeah.
been institutionalized and they've gone to programs, everything from AA on through the process. And what they're looking for is a way to transition back into society as an addict, a recovering addict, but an addict nonetheless.
Yeah.
And so you're thinking that you're going to do it through, and I mentioned the digital advertisements that we're mentioning here. You're thinking you're doing it through that? Is that your business model?
Definitely the social media advertising, Facebook, those sort of things, Craigslist, I suppose, different groups, Facebook groups is an example. But our primary outreach is we're making connections and contacts, introducing ourselves to the treatment centers that are near us
Okay.
first, and just kind of expanding out. Talbot, I think, is quite a
it's
big one.
Really, yeah, it is.
And we would easily serve them because of our proximity.
And Talbot primarily deals with healthcare professionals and attorneys and others, right? Pilots, yeah.
And I guess my point, I suppose, with coming straight out of prison is we're not like a kind of a halfway house sort of situation.
Right.
And then and there is some vetting, like we would do background checks and all that, so that there's not violent.
So that
History.
you would do criminal background checks on the individuals? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and was your goal 3 people?
We were hoping to do more.
I am.
We were hoping to.
No, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, and listen, I appreciate your candor and fairness, because this is a public hearing.
Sure.
Your adversaries will, if they find out you can't appear and talk, they're going to pull this and they're going to look.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's 100%.
Yeah.
And if they're watching, welcome.
Yeah.
So
So you don't have to answer.
you
any
don't
of these questions
have to answer anything you're uncomfortable with, but
as
but-
you're not an attorney.
through my life, nobody's ever hurt my feelings by saying, hey, I want to talk to my lawyer, because I would have said, if I was in your chair, I'd want to talk to mine too. But in this case we're working in, it's very clear. We've all read the email,
Yeah.
and so, I mean, it's pretty clear. I just wanted to understand what your intent was. I'm so glad you're here, since you were a part of the conversation early on. And
My ears were burning.
yeah. And because I'm looking for some, no offense, I was looking for some ill intent or self-gaining motive. And I'll tell you this, and I'll tell the mayor of College Park this, I don't see that.
They're out there for sure. No, I called Candace. One of the first things I did is called GAR, just to say I want to be certified. I know we don't have to be, but why wouldn't I? Because the last thing I wanted at all was to be lumped in with like that flop house situation I was seeing. And this is a big thing on YouTube. You can go look at, there's a couple of people out there who are promoting sober living. And again, it's just sad. It's sad. Even when they're well-intentioned, it just feels like not a home, it's again, bed and a spoon. And ours in particular, we have gone out of the way to, furnish it like a home. We could go to Walmart and just get a kit. We didn't do that. We found, the furnishings. We have what we call the unnecessaries, these little things that would cost us more to have them in the house. But the idea is while you're sitting there, you'll discover them, maybe give you a smile and all that. It's to really make it. We have a thing on our website, which it's the last place before your first place. Like, we don't want a high turnover. We want folks to go there and be successful in the recovery and move on. And, and not have to. I have a friend who I work with in the film industry who always helped me with permitting and stuff like that. He had a friend, he told me, who was in recovery, went to one of these houses and then slept on his couch for 2 weeks. So a bed would open up in another one because it was just that kind of sardine can, you're here for the money I get from your bed sort of approach.
We-
We're trying to do.
Well, you
avoid
you heard me speaking to Ian earlier, and so when you came up with this idea,
Mhm.
did it ever cross your mind to go to the city and say, hey, this is my idea, and are there anything prohibiting me? Because a lot of times with the people calling going, hey, I've got a, which I gotta say, I don't think necessarily it's the heroin addict that calls looking for a bed. It's a friend trying to help a heroin addict out. But did it ever cross your mind to say, because you would have been doing the same thing? Hey, look, I know we always assume there's gonna be pushback. So let me knock these obstacles down early to reach out to the city and say, hey, look, this is my business I'm thinking about opening here. Will this comply with all city laws and ordinances? And then we discover there's an unconstitutional, possibly ordinance or something else in there. And then we reach out to somebody like Ian in the community that happens to be an attorney, that he can say, hey, let me give you these resources. And so we can knock these obstacles down for you and work with the city to help them be better and help you do what you want to do. Did you do any of that?
In this specific case, and it's my mistake, there is some contradiction between the county zoning and the city zoning.
Okay.
And one says you can, one says you can.
Are you in the incorporated part of College Park, or are you in the county?
Incorporated?
Okay.
So it didn't work in my favor. And of course, as 28 years as a location manager for movies and television, I know how to go in and kind of de-escalate and disarm. And I did reach out to, I'll call her Sherry the Addict. That was the pseudonym she used, but it was a neighbor. And I phoned her and I just asked, let's talk about it. I've heard some of the wild things that everybody's afraid of. Those aren't going to happen. And I'm happy to discuss, like I would in a neighborhood if we're filming, let's talk. Communication's the big thing. If I park a generator truck pumping exhaust into your house, let me know, I'll move it. And that was kind of what I was thinking I could do here is find a way that let's all communicate. So we can work these things out. Some might be real, some are fantasy. But that wasn't the, that wasn't the response I got.
It was just adamantly opposed, right?
She said that we don't like you here.
Okay.
And the neighborhood has rallied together to call the mayor, call the code office, and we're going to run you out of here. That was, and then she said,
It was, and all that sounds extremely reasonable up to the, we're going to run you out of here. I think that that's kind of unnecessary, but that sounds like a reasonable response. It's like I said, I know where Senator Jackson's heart is. I don't know her constituents, but she and I both advocate for things.
For my constituents.
Yeah. She and I advocate for we each have very different missions, and I represent people that are absolutely opposed to my mission, and she does the same.
Yeah.
And we have to figure out a way to educate,
Yeah.
to get us somewhere where we can work together. And she and I have been very successful at doing that because of the fact that we don't get hard on either side until we check out the issue completely. And
Yeah.
so, but I do understand people doing that.
I do
And they
too.
do it for a
Yeah.
lot of things. They do it for data centers. They do it for recovery. And a lot of times, once they're educated, then we see a little more flexibility in there.
Yeah.
Because like she said, I don't want to, look, I live in rural Georgia. I live out just outside of Columbus on 6 acres that are mine.
Mhm.
And I don't want to come home and see 8 guys standing on the corner smoking cigarettes
Yeah.
across from a cow pasture and a hayfield. It's just,
Sure.
it's just something you don't want to see. And so, but on the front end where you're running them through this vetting process,
Mhm.
that should alleviate some of those concerns. And the fact that you're doing a criminal background check that I want to point out has to be voluntary.
Mhm.
You can't get my name and go run my criminal history.
Yeah.
I have to sign something giving you permission to do that.
Yeah.
And for me to do that, that takes a lot of, that's opening myself up to be scrutinized as a person who's been dealing and I'm talking about hypothetical me, but if I were somebody dealing with recovery from a serious addiction, there's probably going to be a few bumps and bruises on my criminal history. And so for me to be willing to open the door on my soul and lay it all out there, not just for you to see, but your staff to see, and then for everybody in the neighborhood to know that I've done that,
Yeah.
that's got to make somebody a little more pliable, I would think, unless it's somebody that's just absolutely cold and refusing to understand.
Well, I was hoping for that. And also because I'm not through recovery, we have consultants who have been through recovery and who are helping us with the interviewing process to make sure that the folks who want to be there really want to be there for the right reasons, not just to get the rain off their head. I mean, they're there to really be successful. And I do understand it. I get it. I get the fears. I heard some of them. They're wild. We have rules about you're not allowed to congregate out front, for example. And I wanted to go through all that stuff in the process, but to concede a little bit, I get it. And part of that is probably what we're talking about with having some sort of certification. I wanted to be able to, mandatory or not, at least point to GAR and say, we're living up to a standard. You can go look up the standard. And I know, again, some of the real estate investor minds, which is they will stop, the threshold becomes the certification. Like, I'm not going to have anyone looking at my house or looking over my shoulder, especially if I don't have to. So I understand that could be the fear. There's a lot of areas where I'm sure that they're having a problem, but one of them is I don't know who you are. I don't know that you're living to a standard. I don't know who these people are. I don't know that you're vetting them. I don't, I get it. And I met the husband of Sherry the Addict on the street the other day. He's very nice.
And let's be clear, Sherry the Attic is
It's
a
the
pseudonym.
fake name.
The fake name,
It's the
yeah,
fake
yeah,
name.
yeah.
But very, very nice interaction. I mean, I can tell that some of the nastiness is not natural to them. There's some integrity in that. Like, he's not good at it.
Yeah.
He's good at being just a nice, normal guy in the neighborhood. So, but I thought I could maybe diffuse it. And I think I still probably could to a degree if we had more communication.
Yeah.
The communication got shut down in that one phone call.
Well, I look forward to watching the process go
Yeah,
through.
me too.
I'm hoping you are successful in
Thank you.
trying to do what you want to do. Yeah, I read people pretty well. I think your heart's in the right place. And I mean, I'm saying that publicly, and if I
Thank you.
find out it's not, I'll say
Appreciate it.
publicly that I was wrong. But I do think that this problem is not going to go away unless we have facilities out there, residential recovery places where individuals can find an off-ramp back into society so that they can have the pride of going and sitting out around a fire pit with friends, preparing meals in a kitchen with friends, understanding that at 11 o'clock at night, all sound goes off and obtrusive lighting is turned off, and everybody, sits on the couch and eats popcorn and watches television like every other normal Georgian does or can do.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you're trying to do, Senator Jackson.
Yeah, thank you. It seems to me though that right now the posture that you're in is that if you intend to have more than 3 people, you have no legal recourse to actually be able to do that in the city of College Park right now.
Mhm.
Is that my correct understanding?
It seems to be the case.
And so
And Ian, you cannot testify from that seat. If you need to sit next to him and back him up on any of this, I keep seeing your eyebrows go up and down. So just
Yeah.
want to make that point of clarification.
Yeah.
Sit by you really quick.
Sure.
And just,
Please.
you'll be on witness mic 1.
Wonderful.
Re-identify yourself, please, for those, and then if you want to address Senator Jackson's question.
My name's Ian Neubauer, owner operator of Second Chance Recovery Residences and counsel to this gentleman. When you say legal recourse,
yeah, so right now, again, I'm based on what state laws are currently, based on what College Park's current ordinances are, is there any pathway for him to legally be able to operate with more than 3 non-related individuals?
there's no statutory or municipal framework for us to apply for, say, a reasonable accommodation or a supplemental use permit. Our only pathway for recourse
Is
is
a lawsuit.
lawsuit.
Which you're saying there is no pathway, therefore it's a violation of law because there is no pathway.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
That is the constitutional issue.
Yes, and Fair Housing Act, federal law.
And I did, having read that law a few times, I did figure that there would be reasonable accommodations, you know, as it's stated in the law. The response we got said they have no mechanism for
Yes,
it.
you know.
So I wasn't expecting that.
Which,
That was-
which is where the due process question comes in, correct? Okay.
Precisely.
Yeah, I was hoping that we would talk about something and it would come up if it got that far. But it was shut down. I mean, it almost says it, so don't even ask.
Now,
Do you all have a sense of like how many people are in this type of situation? Like this is very impossible for you to answer, but like, I'm curious about how many recovery houses would we have? How many more options would we have if we didn't have these hurdles?
This is this is an issue that confronts anybody who openly, in the light, opens up a sober living, period. I mean, the NIMBYs and the statutory framework or the lack thereof, we would have a lawsuit for every single sober living operator in the state if they were to come out and say, hey, here's what we're doing, because of, I mean, that's just the framework.
So in your legal opinion,
Mhm.
no sober living facility, GAR certified or not, is actually operating within the current statutory limits.
they are.
They are, and I'm sorry to say, so let
Yeah.
me backtrack. I think that when you asked how many people are facing this,
Yeah.
the vast majority. So let me
And I want to point out, and the reason I said they are is because we've just discussed there are counties and municipalities that have ordinances that specifically, right. But what I'm saying is we cannot say all.
agree.
Because there are counties and municipalities who have been responsible and have put ordinances out there to accommodate
Mhm.
these individuals that are looking to live in recovery residences. So I just want to be clear on that.
You're correct. The
Yeah.
problem being is that the counties and cities that have done this, they place a cap on the number of individuals. So I think Marietta is 3 people for a quote unquote, they call it they have a name for it. I can't remember what it is, but it's a recovery residence effectively. They cap it at 3 people. Roswell, they define group home, right? And that permits up to 6 people plus staff, but they have a 3,500-foot separation requirement, which is, I mean, it has been ruled per se illegal, thrown out because of
As in like the house has to be, it's like setbacks, like you can't have another house within 3,500
another
feet?
group home.
Or another group home.
35, and that's exactly 2/3 of a mile.
Which that was mentioned in Daniel's
Yeah.
presentation, correct?
Correct. So you can't operate in compliance. Again, when you're capping it at 3 people, but they do, there is a framework that exists where, yes, I mean, you
But isn't
can,
that repetitious? 3 people are allowed anyway, correct?
It is.
funny you should say that.
No, I'm just saying, that's just, all you're doing is pointing out, yeah, I'm going to allow you to walk across the street in the pedestrian crosswalk. Well, I don't need your permission because that permission's already granted.
Yep.
Right. So to her point, in looking at this ordinance here in particular,
Mhm.
have you looked in to see if this is a model ordinance that's given out by GMA?
I have not.
Because I know, if somebody wants to, if a municipality wants to start a police department per
Mhm.
se, they can go to the International Association of Chiefs of Police and they can get a model
Hmm.
ordinance or model policy manuals, everything to do that. And so I'm just wondering if they kind of went out on their own and somebody said, hey, we need an ordinance to prevent this, to not think about, having these types of places. So,
I
because this
think-
may be a much bigger problem than just College Park. To
Oh, I
Senator
think it's right.
Jackson's point, what I'm saying is where it's written in their ordinances, you can't do it, not just that they refuse to do it.
where they don't have, where it is a per se ban on anything other than single family dwellings. That is the norm. And so I don't think that they wrote this with the intent to preclude or exclude recovery residences. that's just the norm right there. And by application of it to what we are and what we do, they can just say, here's what's permitted, here's what's not. Sorry, there's no, what do you want from us?
And to get to the spine of this study committee, isn't it the norm also that there are people out there that come in and say, hey, I'm gonna open up a recovery residence. I'm gonna recruit people from these different places, and they just run it like it's a regular house. They never get a certification. They never get anything. And people are coming in and living in their house, and they're doing all this. And to use his word, it's almost a flop house type mentality,
Mhm.
but they're running it as a recovery center.
Mhm.
So we have two big problems that hopefully this study committee will solve. But so as bad as this is just as bad over here, right?
Mhm.
May I?
Oh, absolutely.
So the flop house that I
Yeah.
visited, the gentleman was trying to sell it to me. He'd moved out of state, and so he had this investment property he wanted to do. But when I visited it with him, I was asking things like, "So where are the fire extinguishers? You got to have those." Oh, they steal them. I see. So how do you?
It's very valuable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
The arsonist thing.
Yeah. and I'm like, I had told him later, like, I don't know how I would ensure this. Like, what happens if there's a fire in one of these? It just stunk of cigarette smoke and all that. Everybody locked in their rooms and smoking and all that. And I said, what? Like, I don't know how to insure it. If this place burns to the ground, and why were there 7 people in the house? Like, how am I explaining that to someone? He goes, oh, it's fine. It's not, he said it's not allowed, but I've been doing it for like 5 years and all that. And I brought it up at a real estate investor meeting, and they're like, yeah, I mean, there's ways you could do it, but don't worry about it. My fear there is without, again, this is exactly why I said, make me certified. I don't want to be associated with that. I want everyone to know that that's not what I'm running. But that's I guess the worst case scenarios. If it's like you were just saying, you just open the doors and come on in.
And those
all that.
do happen.
I was there. I saw one, at least one of them, but
It's-
it's not rampant. I
It
suppose.
seems to me that we have a tool available to us to shut down the bad operators. It's that they're illegal. They're operating outside of the color of the law. The trouble is everybody is operating outside of the color of the law, with a few exceptions of cities and counties that have given good ordinances. But the same hammer, the same tool that we could use to shut down the bad operators, which is you have more than 4 non-related individuals living in a house, that same tool would apply to the good operators who also have. And so I think I see the problem. This is, the perpetual, in my neighborhood, I live on 10 acres in the city, Randy. So no cows, but we have roosters. And it's a perpetual, nobody knows who the roosters belong to. And as long as nobody complains about the roosters, as long as nobody complains about the roosters, zoning never gets involved.
Exactly right.
And it seems to me that that's how our residential communities have been operating here, is that as long as nobody complains, it's all fine. But the reality is they're all illegal.
Well,
And that's what we need to solve for, it sounds like.
well, no,
me.
to be clear, there are residential recovery residences that are legally operating in Georgia.
Agreed.
A
Yes.
few of them.
No, I mean, I think more than a few, because I mean, they comply with all ordinances within the cities and the counties.
Yep.
Because every one of them, and I hate to keep going back to the same one because there have been others. I mean, how many do you have?
We've got 6 residential
Right,
properties.
and are all of them in compliance?
They're in compliance.
Yeah. So I want to be,
It's the residential requirement. cap.
yes,
With the Roswell 6-person cap. So,
Yes.
but which, again, tight, but yes.
Would you operate in Macon with 6 people legally?
No.
So
and,
couldn't.
and why do you say that? Do you know the Bibb County ordinances or?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Because it is a consolidated government, so it's the
I've-
county, yeah.
We've had conversations.
Okay,
When I say, so a lot, again, going back to something that I do not have a proposed solution for yet, Daniel does not either. The community residence model in Georgia is the independent apartments, right? So a vast majority of the sober living programs in the state of Georgia, they lease apartments.
Yeah.
And an apartment, just like a home, is a single family dwelling unit.
Right.
And a single family dwelling unit can house a family. And you can put 4 people or 3
Yeah.
people in an apartment. You fall through the cracks, like, you know, you are compliant, right? And that's one of the reasons that the apartment model exists is because
Heard that.
But the apartment model is in compliance with Georgia law.
It is.
100%.
Okay, yeah.
It is.
So, and what we have to do is we have to expand the ability for people to do this while cutting out those who are running and I've never heard it said better, but the bed and the spoon,
Mhm,
you know,
mhm.
so.
Well, and I mean, that goes also, you guys were talking about this earlier, and I guess we're talking about it now, the number that's allowed to make it affordable. So there's people acting in good faith who it's like bed and spoon because they can't afford to do anything nicer than that and still provide the service. So that is one of the problems with the caps, to make it the capitalism thing, right? To make it,
But good faith is not having a fire extinguisher, allowing people
Well,
to
that
smoke
guy,
without a house and all that. Yeah.
yeah.
But let's just be clear. Good faith is somebody running that model as best as that model can be run
yeah.
with complying with all safety and,
Yeah.
and compassion for the people living there.
That's right. And it's it's the $10 bed that they got at auction at, Salvation Army or something like that, because, and nothing on the walls, nothing like that.
Yeah.
It's just the bare minimum. And one of the things with the NAR and the GAR rules is it said it shouldn't feel institutional, it shouldn't feel clinical, it should feel like a home. That's why we kind of really went with that. It's just they're just sad. They're really sad. And that's the people who are trying to do it right and are doing it right. Technically, it's just the quality of everything goes down to nothing, which, life, right? I lived in a cheap apartment in college and stuff like that. I didn't have things either, but the point there was, I had a place to stay, to go to work and all that. The point here is partly for recovery.
Yeah.
So it's not, you're still trying to give them, again, that soft landing as the transition's the point of it.
Anything else?
The last thing I'll say is so the thing that's going to distinguish you all from a group home or a halfway house is the fact that everyone there has a disability. That's the distinguishing factor. Is that correct?
And I would argue it, depending on how you characterize a group home, yes, the distinguishing factor, the reason that we are protected and unique is the fact that alcoholism, addiction constitutes a disability under federal law, and therefore that's where all of this comes to light.
Right. So if we were to enact zoning preemptive,
I love it.
can't even say it, y'all. Zoning laws, it would be specific to that protected class of individuals living with a disability. That would therefore allow them to congregate in as much as 12 people in one residency, with the caps, of course, based on how much space of living and stuff. I really appreciated that the lawyer brought that in, that we're not promoting overcrowding. So
Absolutely. And that because, again, at its fundamental core, that's applicable universally.
Right.
That is applicable to disabled, non-disabled individuals. You cannot have more people than 50 or 70 feet of living space within a bedroom.
right. Yeah. No, I mean, this is helpful to me. And I think that this is a very heavy lift. But I appreciate you all's testimony. I appreciate your heart for the community and for your willingness to create safe spaces and homes for people who are trying to just get a leg up. I have deep appreciation and gratitude for that. And certainly I would fight for you all to be able to be in my neighborhood. But my neighbors fought me putting a tiny house up. So good luck.
May I add a brief wrinkle?
Please.
We're talking about sober living homes and all that. One of the things I was drawn to this again, kind of from I just think this would be more fulfilling than just renting out properties. But there's also, kids who are aging out of foster care. There's women in distress. There's elderly who are facing imminent homelessness. Like there's other, and those aren't protected classes, but they're group homes potentially. I would love to explore that. Right now, I'm just focused on the one, where I thought I could get some accommodations for it, but,
And that's been a big problem. We've had issues with hoteling of children aging out of foster care and looking at the costs, and we've reduced that number greatly.
Yeah.
But we're in a society now where we don't live in as philanthropic as we were 20 years ago and other things. So it's a to use Senator Jackson's words, it's a heavy lift. But you know, to build muscle, you got to tear muscle. So hopefully we'll be a whole lot stronger once this process is over. And those are things we have to have conversations about too. With that being said, you good?
I'm good.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for coming today. And it is 11:27. And I know everybody on staff, again, I want to thank y'all for always having my back and the hard work y'all do. I want to thank Jackson for taking the abuse I continue to heap upon him on a regular basis, even though he's the guy that writes all my press releases and makes me look as good as he can possibly make me look. But I appreciate the work. Thank you for getting the internet back up, Jackson, from where you were sitting over there in the corner. Because I started getting text messages saying we can't see what's going on, and it was from people from GAR and STAR and FAR and DAR and everywhere else. So I greatly appreciate all the work y'all do. And of course, Will Spencer, my legislative assistant, who's always trying to keep all the sheetrock in my office patched up and in right condition. So, but with all that being said, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you guys so much.
I would